And officially, welcome to summer. It's Frankie's Got a Big Mouth with the big guest talking about the big topics around the country as well. Make sure that you go to the website, check it out, join us, follow us, like us as well on YouTube. But let me introduce my guest. Always good to have with me. He is a political consultant, a former military man, a veteran, served in the United States Navy, also a former union representative, worked in Washington for a number of congressional members. Always good to have on Frankie's Got a Big Mouth, Duran Marshall. Good to have you back on, Duran.
Hey, good to be here, Frankie. Always good to talk to you and with your amazing guests. So look forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. Listen, always good to have in the studio as well from Bro Talk Live. It is Dexter Stuckey, a graduate of the Lincoln University with a master's degree from Penn State as well, and host of one of the most exciting social media podcasts in the country. Thank you for joining us and joining us for this show. It's going to be a great topic. How you doing, Dexter?
Super excited. Again, I want you to do all my introductions for everything that I do.
Absolutely. So, of course, through Real Times Media, Frankie's Got a Big Mouth is hosted as well by a number of legendary African American newspapers around the country, including the Chicago Defender, which celebrated recently 118 years serving the city of Chicago, but the nation as well. And good to have with us Tacoma Robach. Tacoma, welcome to Frankie's Got a Big Mouth.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and honor to be on the show in your presence. I'm looking forward to this.
Very good. First, let me ask you, how's everything in Chicago? Because the story we're going to talk about today, it's not as if most of the cities that we're in don't have more than enough conversation, but we're going to talk about the Clarissa Hood story that happened about a week or so ago where she was arrested and her son. The story initially broke to the nation that she sent her son in to shoot an individual. I take very serious issue with that, particularly as a media person, professional, and a journalist that has covered a number of different stories and done investigative journalism as well. How things have just gotten out of sorts. But how are things in Chicago? And then we're going to talk about the actual topic.
Well, unfortunately, sometimes Chicago gets tagged with a negative reputation. I like to refer to the city as a very dynamic city where things are always happening. I'm not a native Chicagoan, but I've lived here almost as long as I've lived in my birthplace, which is Brooklyn, New York. But I hold this city very dearly because it is a very dynamic, very active city. And sometimes we have these negative news events that really portray the city in the wrong light, in my opinion.
Yeah, first of all, hello, Brooklynite. Born and raised in Cooper Park back in the day in Greenpoint. And Detroit became my home as well, and now living in Philadelphia. Duran, I think you can relate to that being a native Detroiter, where the nation gets a lot of the negative news, but the city of Detroit is a wonderful place.
That's totally correct. The city of Detroit is phenomenal, just like Chicago. I'm proud of your paper, but I visited Chicago right out of high school. I attended DePaul and DeVry. I worked at the Chicago Board of Trades down on LaSalle. I still feel that Chicago is one of the greatest cities. And hopefully the news stories about like a Detroit and Chicago turns more about the great people instead of the incidents that happen that seem to get our attention all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we start with this topic, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, thank you so very much, Tacoma, as well, because the nation heard the story. And of course, we got the edited social media version, the rush to judgment version of Carlishia Hood, who was in a hot dog fast food restaurant picking up her order. And in that process, based on only what we've seen from video and what I've been able to research and individuals I've been able to talk to, and one video that has been made available to the public post the story was that she and a gentleman in the store got into an altercation. And as a result, based on the video made available, he assaulted Ms. Hood. Tell us the story, what you know, and you attended the press conference this week as well.
Yes, I have. And so here's what I know. Initially, when we first learned of this case, it was just surveillance video of Miss Hood and her son engaged in the shooting. We didn't know the context of the video. And then days later, we saw video of the act inside the actual restaurant. And before I continue, I do want to acknowledge that a life was lost. And my condolences and my heart goes out to the family of Jerome Brown, who was killed in this altercation. However, the surveillance video does show this gentleman repeatedly punching Carlishia Hood in her face, and so
I mean, like a man,
like
she was a man.
straight up, like she was a straight up man repeatedly slugging her in the face. That's what the video seems to show, and it's just horrific all the way around.
So let's start with the arrest. So after the police arrived, based on the information that you have, just tell us how she ended up incarcerated and how she ended up being released. And now there are several lawsuits that she has against the police department and the city of Chicago.
Right. So, according to her attorneys, I attended a press conference today at her attorney's office where they announced that they had filed a 4-count lawsuit against the city of Chicago and Chicago police, or actually 5 Chicago police officers who were involved in her arrest. So, just to lay out a timeline, the actual incident between her and Mr. Brown and her son, who was 14, occurred on June 18th. According to the lawsuit, Miss Hood was detained and arrested on June 21st, 2023. So that was 3 days afterwards. But what they're alleging is that officers between the 18th and the 21st had ample time to review the security footage and also ascertain that Miss Hood was not involved or participated in any act that would amount to first-degree murder. So that's one. And so what they're claiming based on that evidence is that she was wrongfully arrested and detained because she had committed no acts of first-degree murder, according to the security footage that they could have had access to.
And we normally have attorneys on. We're while we're shooting this, but part of that is because they had access or should have had access prior to arresting her. And are they alleging that had they had that access, they would, if they had done their jobs, essentially, they would have seen the footage that we now have seen from inside the restaurant, and that it would not have amounted to first-degree murder, and it is more or less a self-defense.
And so, quoting straight from the complaint, the paperwork here, here's what the attorneys assert, right? Accordingly, there was no legal or legitimate basis to believe that Carlishia Hood committed an act of first-degree murder or any crime at all. That's straight from the paperwork.
All right. Now, so what we do know is that a lawsuit, and you mentioned that in your comments, she has been released. The charges against both she and her son have been dropped. And moving forward now with a lawsuit. Dexter, I want to start with you as well, because what we're talking about here, these are African-American folk. The young man, Mr. Brown, African-American, Ms. Hood, African-American, her son, African-American. You host a podcast. You have a degree in communications, an undergraduate degree in communications, working in media, and you do a podcast. I will tell you, I think a lot of people who jumped into the podcast world, not formally being trained, are saying and doing things that are just reckless and irresponsible. And here is where we have all of this misinformation on the internet. In addition to that, I'll say this, in media, there are a lot of us that want to be first, not factual. And, Tacoma, and, being in the print world, everybody wants to be first, not factual. And sometimes we'll be first, and no matter what it is, we don't come back in the third and fourth and make the correction to what we said first. So Dexter, your thought on that, especially where we're talking about the loss of a life and the potential incarceration of 2 other people.
hmm I do agree with it. I think there's even today, there's so much more information that I just found out. Like I when I saw this, I actually assumed that it happened the day before, like not a week later. Like we're getting this
Hmm.
information not even in real time, and we're forming opinions on something that we really could have done a lot more research on, and actually got a little bit more educated with our opinions, as well as the police officers as well. Now, I will say though that I'm a little perplexed about the lawsuit. Like I don't understand like how we got to the space of a lawsuit. I do understand that she's suing them for emotional distress and for being unlawfully detained. But I feel like that's what's supposed to happen. Like someone was killed, and it's like instead of giving you the opportunity to flee the country, i.e., like the same way they did with George Zimmerman, the same way they did with Travis Rudolph, like you detain the people who could potentially be guilty, and then when you get their day in court, or if you determine like, oh look, you know what, this person's not guilty, like you release them. And I feel like if they saw this footage and they didn't release her and her son, then I'd be like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. But because
Well,
they did,
yeah.
I
Well, I would start here. No difference to me than Susan Limeritz, who is in Osaka, Florida, who shot
Mhm.
the woman through the door. It was a number
Yes,
of days before they would even arrest her. And because of Florida's stand your ground law, they felt that they had to dot their I's and cross their T's. And it was
that's
several
fair.
days before they arrested her. I think people of color, African American folk, and I'm not just using race as the litmus, but I believe here what they're saying is, had the police officers done their due diligence, if the videos were available, if they had access to them, whether or not they did or did not look at them, but incarcerated her anyway, that's a problem.
Yes, but at the same time though, like the person, her, yes, but there was somebody who was shot and killed, right? So like at the
Und-
end of the day, like I do think there's something that needs to be done about that, and that needs to be addressed. And I think that's what the officers did. And truthfully, I believe in self-defense. I do believe that people can carry weapons
so
and
if
defend
so,
themselves.
Dexter, so you're saying if somebody assaulted you in a parking lot and listen, that listen, God forbid.
Be careful
But
because
you
I live
and
in
you
Philadelphia. It
defended
could happen.
yourself you believe that you should be that you wouldn't have a problem with being incarcerated for 2 or 3 days when simply looking at video surveillance tape could have justified that you did what you did in self-defense, but you don't have a problem being inside of jail for 3 days. If you say yes, I think you've never been inside of jail.
Well, I haven't. I've never been inside of a jail before, but I do believe in the process too. And like at the end of the day, like she didn't necessarily defend herself. She got on the phone and she got a 14-year-old to,
That's defense. If you're sitting in my car, I'm a woman. If you're
but
sitting, if you're
Frank, if
sitting in
you
my
took
car,
my gun, if you took my gun that's not registered to you, and you took that gun and you shot it and you killed someone, you're gonna have to answer to that. Like there's some questions that
Dexter,
people
for
are gonna
real.
ask
So,
you.
if I'm in my house and you happen to be in my house and somebody breaks in and they're assaulting me, and I tell you go to my dining room table to get the gun, you're
Yeah.
gonna sit there and say, "Well, Frankie, it's your gun, but I'm gonna run down the hall and I'm gonna call the police and ask for permission."
Frankie, let me tell
It's all
you.
self-defense.
Let me tell you, Frankie, I
Yes,
got hands. I'm fighting back. Like I don't have to get no gun. I got hands.
I
But
get
I
it. I
really,
know because
but I really feel like a 14-year-old though, like the thought process of a 14-year-old picking up a gun in defense or not and shooting someone scares me. And I
Well,
feel like
let me just say to you that there are kids in this country as young as 8, 9, and 10
I
that
understand.
learn how to shoot firearms. And if you talk to enough people in the NRA and some Republicans, they're extremely young. And I'll tell you that when my daughter was 12 or 14, 13, 14, we would go to the gun range. I don't think
Well, I'm anti-gun, and I also like I don't just say like
you
I have an issue
anti-gun
with
until
guns.
you need one.
I don't say I'm anti-guns just when there's a mass shooting. I'm
Yes.
generally anti-guns, and I feel like in this situation we're doing that thing where we pick and choose when we want to be anti or pro guns and stuff like that. And I think we really as African Americans are on a very slippery slope right now.
I don't think I'm not anti-gun because
I get
what is
it.
anti-gun? I'm anti people with bad behavior that don't know how to handle a gun and using them recklessly. I'm anti that. I'm
Well,
anti
well,
irresponsible people who bring guns into the neighborhood
if
and
you're
put
shooting
them in the
someone in the
hands of
back,
drug dealers.
if you're
You
shooting
don't need
someone
to
in
be
the back,
anti-gun. Listen, it's not about being an anti-gun. It's anti-bad behavior.
Yeah, but if you're shooting somebody in the back and chasing them down to continue to shoot them, like some people would say that is bad behavior as well.
Well, and I
That's what
would say
happened in the
to that
situation.
person, and I think that every situation is different, and I don't want to say what is and isn't, and Dexter and I always go back and forth like this for people who are watching and either cussing him or me out while they watch. I'm just saying that he and I go back and forth like this all the time. But what I will tell you is, until you find yourself in a situation where you are trying to save your life, I think that people should reserve saying how they would actually respond. Let me get Duran in on this as well, Duran. There always is somewhat a rush to judgment in the situation. And let me be clear, someone did lose their life. The young brother, the gentleman, the brother that lost his life, it was unfortunate. I think one or the other could have just stopped arguing and let's just walk away. I want to try in public with people I don't know. I don't want to blow at people in traffic. I don't want to stick my middle finger up. I don't want to do all that. I just want to get home safely.
That's right.
But I will tell you this. I was horrified as an African American woman to see her have that conversation with that gentleman. Absolutely. And to literally rear his arm back and punch her repeatedly. I would be remiss as a Black woman to not notice the way and the viciousness that woman was attacked. Duran.
So a couple phases, and I always enjoy being on the show with Dexter because he always brings a bright new perspective to something I was already thinking of. But let me give it to you as a young man, the only boy in the family. My job is to protect my mom. Let me just tell you flat out, you can't hit my mother. Period. We can debate whether he should have got a gun, whatever, but you can't hit my mother ever. Dude was out of order. I'm a veteran. Guns have their place. We defend this country based on guns. So the issue isn't guns. The issue is who we're allowing to get guns. It can't be guns. It can't be guns. Well, our freedom, our very freedom is based on our ability to defend this country. So therefore, we can't have that lack of conversation. It's got to be a little more granular than good guns, than, good guns are bad, guns are good. It's an issue of who has the right to carry a gun, which is the whole issue. But let me just tell you, the way that guy decided he was going to beat somebody's mother, sister, or girlfriend inside of a store like she was a man, he shouldn't have hit a man that way. The conflict wasn't at that level. Matter of fact, looking at the video, he had more energy than anyone. Yep. She didn't even bring that energy. She didn't swing on him first. The son didn't come in there ahead of time to shoot him. But let me tell you, if my mother is hit, dude, there ain't a time. Matter of fact, they're going to have to I could see maybe the young man being detained, but the mother was being beat. I'm sorry. I don't care what her phone call would have been made. Who pulled the trigger is the issue. It's not the phone call, but it's more specifically, what kind of brothers are we making? That you go to a store and beat a woman down because you got a conflict, or to beat anyone down. I mean, I think as African Americans, we're always standing up for what's right, the justice system. But sometimes the justice system is not just. And it's us challenging the justice system to be just is what gives us our rights. It's not saying, well, it's against the law. Laws have been wrong for years. We've had to govern under unjust rule for years. And we've challenged that and we've created change. So to Dexter's point, yes, there's some validity in the fact that a lot of wrong occurred on that occasion. But let's start with the bigger wrong. You hit my mama. You not hitting my mother. And whatever happens after that, bro, you shouldn't have hit my mama. So.
All right. Yeah, speaking of that, and Duran, you brought up the video. Let's take an opportunity and watch that video and how this incident got started and it unfolded.
Get your food. Who? Get in the car? Who? Nay. Get your food. Get your food. If you say one more thing, I'm gonna knock you out. Oh my grandma, say one more thing, I'm gonna knock you out. Say one more thing, I'm gonna knock you out.
Now, Dexter, I want to come back to you, but I want to start with you as well, Tacoma. You started as well, starting by saying, we want to acknowledge that somebody lost their life. Yeah. Are people divided at all in this story in Chicago?
Very much so. There's been a lot of division about this issue. And so when I was at the press conference today, it was acknowledged that There have been threats of retribution, in light of all this.
And why? Why have there been threats? And she made that comment. We're gonna hear from her in the press conference that was heard. What is the retribution? Or why is there some retaliatory issue, you think?
I think that sentiment exists because a life was lost. And I think that sentiment exists because there are people who believe that it should have never resulted, that kind of conflict should have never resulted in anyone dying fundamentally. And I will say, hearing you guys talk about this, there was something that really resonated with me from this press conference. The fact that she said that she was beaten, she had didn't deserve that, and she was arrested anyway.
Anyway, right?
Anyway, and so you take yourself through that. Can you imagine how demoralizing that is? And so the woman that I saw before me today was very clearly very traumatized from the whole ordeal. And even though she was acquitted of all charges were dropped against her and her son. It's had a visible toll on her life already.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Dexter, I do want to come back to you. I find it interesting, Duran, as well, to hear Tacoma, say that, and I get it, we could all look at the same thing and come up with a different result. But our actions cause therefore a reaction. And Dexter, you brought up the piece about African Americans and like. When I'm out as a seasoned sister, I'd like to be able to walk into a place and know that my brothers, the young Black men who look like me, they look like they could be my son, not be the ones who are going to beat me, not be that I have to fear. And I can tell you, driving around major cities around the country, and I see young brothers walk across the street or walking behind me or walking beside me, I should feel protected and not threatened.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't continue to make excuses for people in bad behavior. Dexter.
No, I agree. I agree with that. I don't think that we should do that. And I just think though, like when we go down these paths like this, I feel like we see this so often. Like this was just one situation that got caught on camera, and it's weird because I feel like we give social media a lot of flack, but this woman would probably still be in jail if it wasn't for social media. So I do think that's something important to like put out there. I don't know. I guess my part
because Dexter, so because you have 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. As he was beating her, if there were no intervention, the conversation would have, quite frankly, and had he beat her to death, had he beat her to within an inch of her life, or had taken her life, we'd have been having this conversation about his action versus her action.
Yes, for sure.
We've got to pick one or the other. And the fact is,
well, I think everybody is in agreement that he was wrong. I think like no matter what, and I'm a religious person, so I want to tread lightly on this comment, but some people earn things, and I think he earned something. Like you did something and you got something that you got what you deserved in a sense. Like you beat on somebody and somebody retaliated, and that's what ended up happening to you. My issue overall, I think, is the lawsuit. Like I'm fine with them not being in jail. I just it almost feels like a money grab to me, and that part it just is not. That's hard for me. I'm glad that she's out of jail. I'm glad that the charges are dropped. The boy's 14 years old. Like he really shouldn't never have to deal with this.
Right.
It's just the lawsuit, and then seeing that the lawsuit, and maybe it's more, but from what I saw, it was about $50,000. To me that just doesn't seem.
You said the lawsuit was about $50,000.
It said she was suing for $50,000.
Well,
$50,000.
In courts, there's a minimum. So the number could end up being higher than that.
I would hope so, because if you're taking these people to court for $50,000 and you're saying
there has to be, depending on the court, depending on the county, there's a certain amount at a minimum.
Good.
And then negotiate with, if there is any negotiation, if a judge says no, I'm dismissing it or whatever the case might be, there has to be a minimum. And obviously, I don't know Tacoma, but that be the minimum amount in Cook County to file any kind of civil judgment against someone.
Yeah, that's something that I have to look at. But just to answer your question about the lawsuit, because that was a question that I had. What do you say to people who would look at this and say, "Hey, your charges were dropped. That should be enough." But I keep going back to that statement that I mentioned earlier that she was beaten. She had done nothing to provoke that kind of treatment, and then she was arrested. And so, again, the crux of her false arrest claim here is that she was imprisoned without warrant, without probable cause, without legal justification, and due to that arrest, her liberty was restrained as a human being. So
Did you guys see a
basis.
different? Sorry.
That's the basis.
Was there a different video that was out? Because every video I've seen is the confrontation. Like I didn't see anything prior to that, so I actually don't know what was said by her or to her before any of that. I'm not saying it justifies anything.
Right.
It just it's weird. Like the video starts and he's like,
well, let me say two things to that. And there's a second video I want us to see, which is her comment, because even from Tacoma, what we have seen in terms of her arrest photo and the photo of her son and the like, to see her at this press conference. I want people to see that, Dexter, because you get to see almost who she is outside of that. But it was really interesting. And there's been edits of it all. But I think the other pieces, which is what I want to talk about on the other side of this video, is that someone standing in line obviously started to record the incident inside the restaurant. And then when he swung the first time. And when he went back to swing a second time, you see the older gentleman run out. And then you see the other person who was recording run too. But not one assisted her in the restaurant to break it up. The video recording, and then I agree with you, Dexter, thanks to videos, we've been able to see things that we haven't been able to see before. But my goodness, somebody's got to step in.
Well, Frankie, can I say this?
They were giving the aid. Jerron, hold that. I'm going to come back to you.
Yes.
Let's watch this video of her at the press conference.
Okay.
On June 18th of this year, my life changed. My son's life changed. I've experienced pain in many ways that I would never have thought, never. What happened to me was totally unnecessary. Never in a million years would I have imagined being brutally attacked, beaten, and then arrested. I am thankful that the Cook County State's Attorney dismissed the case. I am also thankful to have my son with me and by my side, and also his charges being dismissed.
All right, so Jerron,
I just wanted to jump in with this.
Yeah.
To every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. That's the laws of physics. It happens all the time, right? So there was people who choose to grab the video instead of helping. That's a whole nother issue. To Dexter's point, they are videotaping, but they're doing nothing. In many cases, watching murders. In some cases, if you're going to pull out a video, please stop the situation. Particularly if the situation can be stopped by you. I'd rather you throw the video thing down and or give it to someone else and assist that person from being assaulted. I think we need to go to that next level. Second of all, his first hit could have caused her to hit something, bust her head, and kill her. His first hit, that hit he gave her, could have caused an aneurysm, could have caused a blood clot. We're acting as if the first hit was just one. That hit could have taken her life. In many cases, that kind of hit takes people's lives all over the country. And to the lawsuit piece, Tacoma would know more than anyone. In Chicago, there's a large issue about people being arrested and a just cause issue being there. People being detained improperly. There's a big issue. The community's always yelling about how they're being treated. And maybe this lawsuit just continues to shed light on that so we continue to improve the process. Not necessarily $50,000 is not a lot of money, but let me just tell you this. Lawsuits are ample all over this country. Did people complain when the lady got millions of dollars because the McDonald's coffee fell in her lap? How many people jumped up and down and said, "Oh my God, that's way too much money for her. She's spending her money now." This young lady deserves $50,000 for her reputation, $50,000 for the trauma she went through. Notwithstanding, who's standing up for her injuries? Who's standing up for what she had sustained from a strong guy who chose to just plummet her because he had a dispute? I really don't care the conversation ahead of time. The conversation shouldn't have ended up with him swinging on her in that nature. That's
all right. Listen, let me go, Dexter, and I've got a question.
I was just one last thing. Like when you say things like that, it makes me, like the journalist in me, now I want to dig into her background because now I want to know what the reputation really was before this incident.
What difference does that make, though? Because
well, if you're saying you're embarrassed by going to jail and you've been to jail multiple times for other stuff, then like
but
you
Dexter,
can't say this embarrassed you.
I don't care if she's been to jail 5 or 6 times. If in that incident, she did not deserve to go, she shouldn't have gone.
So that time embarrassed you. But we're saying that she's been to jail. She's probably never been to jail. But I'm saying, if you've done something before, you can't throw your reputation and say, like, my reputation is damaged.
But this goes to what I believe some of the lawsuit is about. And I don't know the ethnicity. I don't know the culture. I know what I've read about police and the police misconduct in the city of Chicago. I know, Tacoma, that there has been some recommendations as well with the police department under the previous mayor to make some recommendations to have some of those rogue officers removed, and they were not removed from their duties, but that the perception that this woman did not deserve to the rights that anybody else would have been privy to not be arrested when it was clearly self-defense, that she spent a day, an hour or 2 days where had they done their jobs and looked at the videos and done the necessary investigation, and she wouldn't have been arrested. My question would be whether or not they would do the same thing for that she should be treated like any other citizen in the city of Chicago, particularly if they're not African American. I think that perceptions mean a lot. Perception means a lot. And I just want to say this, the final thing to what you said. If a girl wears a short skirt, she can wear a short skirt as much as she wants. Should she? Maybe she shouldn't. But if she wears jeans the next day and some guy whistles at her just because she had on a short skirt yesterday, doesn't give him the right today to say something disrespectful to her. I'm just saying.
Even if we find out her background, it doesn't suspend her rights.
Right.
And in addition to that, I've met some amazing good cops in Chicago the years I was there. So that's not an environment that's rich with just terrible cops, and they are in tough situations. But the embarrassing piece, did they take her to the hospital first? Did she go were they in the hospital questioning her? Because to me, in the hospital, whether she had a concussion is the issue. Whether or not she had a severe injury was more important than arresting her and taking her to. So I don't know that part of the story, Tacoma. So maybe they did take her. Maybe she did get medical attention. To me, that's the first part of the story, is getting medical attention for the injury that occurred, that they clearly had witnesses there who could say what had occurred.
All right. Now, listen, we've got about 5 minutes before the end of the show, and I love your big mouth topic of the week. So let me just ask this question based on what it is that you said earlier, Deron, and it was around, we're in a day where people are videotaping and the like. And you said, put down the video and help. I'm just curious. If you are in, and I hate to ask each of you, but I'm going to do it because you're some of the most brilliant men I know. If you are in an incident in that store like this one, for example, and something pops off like that, and you're videotaping, most people today, whether they're taping or not, are afraid to blow their horns in traffic.
Mm-hmm.
They're afraid to say something to somebody in the store because it could go left. But would you intervene? Would you, if you were in that store, do you believe, let me just be kind to you, three men. Do you believe some guy you knew would be more likely than not to have intervened in that situation or have ran like the gentleman that was in that video?
So let me just tell you, Frank, my spirit is different because, of course, I took the oath to defend the country. I have a different spirit. If there's a fire, I'm going into it. I think there's I've done it on many occasions. I've had to stand up when a young lady was being yelled at by a customer with a 2x4 at Home Depot.
Wow.
And he's a veteran and I was a veteran. I said, you need to change that. I had to talk to him about what it meant to be a veteran and change that energy while everyone else stood around and let her be just berated. by this ignorance. You of course, you don't know who has a gun, has a weapon, and you don't want to just be wrestling people, but you got to speak up. At a minimum, someone should have been saying, "Yo, man, bring that conversation down."
Yeah.
Minimum. Like you maybe don't jump in, but if you have a camera, give it to that next person and say, "Yo, you got to stop that." Because if she dies, it's on you. Everyone in that store, if that young lady dies because she's beaten up, it's on them as far as I'm concerned. And you just want to be quiet because you're scared of him, but you had no problem in giving up a life for that.
Wow.
After she's gone, who's next?
Yeah. Dexter.
I would not have jumped into that situation. However, I wouldn't have recorded it either. Like when I'm in situations now and I see that kind of stuff happening, I move away from it. Like I wouldn't have known anything happened until I saw it on the TV the next day. Because
so at what point would you have walked away?
When they start to argue, when people get to arguing in public places.
You don't ever go to the store then, do you?
I promise you, Frankie, anytime I see people arguing in public places, I move as far away from that situation as possible because I've seen it. I've seen it
if you found yourself with it, because things can happen in a moment.
Yes.
If you found yourself and a man is yelling at a woman and he barrels off at her, but you're standing there, it was that quick. What do you think you're more likely than not to do?
Well, I've had that situation happen and I have stepped into it. And it's weird because when I've done it, it's been like a domestic situation. And like I calmed the situation down or whatever. Like they didn't fight. But guess what, Frankie? They went home together. And I can't control what they do when they go home. But it's just one of those things where I try to stay out of that kind of stuff as much as possible. But I do think in this specific situation, I am disgusted with the guys who ran away and who decided to hold their phone up. Because if you're going to do that, then you have to intervene, especially when he hit her. Like that was insane. And that was a bit much. And honestly, like violence against women is kids and women is one of those things that makes my skin crawl. So like, I know for a fact that I would have done something. Maybe I wouldn't have like shot him or hit him or whatever, but at least said something.
Yeah. All right, Tacoma. Are you more likely than not? At least the guys you think they're more likely than not to intervene.
We'll get in to try to diffuse the situation to take her away from that situation as peacefully as possible. But yeah, I can't see that happening in my presence with a woman. And just to talk about something that was mentioned earlier, her attorneys did describe her as an upstanding citizen, but that doesn't matter. That shouldn't have happened anyway. No matter what was said, it should have never, ever gotten to that point. Is what I would say.
All right. So listen, we're going to go my round table. Dexter, I'm going to start with you as we get ready to wrap up. First of all, to each and every one watching, thank you so much for watching via Real Times Media, the Black Information Network, and of course, iHeartRadio. Make sure that you go to the Real Times Media website. Find us on YouTube. Thank you to Jamel Cotton as well, who is producing and editing the show. Thank you for each and every one of you watching, and come back each and every week. Dexter, your final closing words. What's on your mind?
I saw a story. There was a transgender woman who is pissed because she was rejected for treatment at a gynecologist's office after being told they don't treat biological males. And this is like picking up a lot of steam on social media because it brings that debate. If you have changed to a woman, you've changed your parts and everything, like should you be seen by people who see women, or should you still go to who you were seeing before?
Well, does she still have what she had before?
I wasn't in there, so I don't know what's going on down there.
Because I'm just thinking do you have what you had before?
When I saw the story initially, I was like, well, what exactly are they going to be
research that story. I'd love to talk about it.
Okay.
Along with whether or not you believe that transgender men should participate in women's athletics. That's a big story. I think that's a good one to cover. Duran, what's on your mind?
So I've watched stories all over the country because of these aggressive bans that women's health care has been tremendously decreased. In some places where you've had the Planned Parenthood might have been the only one there, or there was a clinic that was there, they're gone, they're closed. Everyone's worried about lawsuits in Florida and other places. I think that, as people, we need to watch this space. We're giving up our right citizens and to be human because of some small group of political activists who think no care is in place. It's the same space of getting rid of books. So people need to really, really think about that next election, and who they vote for should be giving you freedom, not taking it away.
All right, Duran, thank you so very much. Dexter is always so controversial. Great point, Duran. And for a lot of college age students, I know it because Planned Parenthood without health care, being too old at that time to be on my parents' health care, Planned Parenthood provided a number of healthcare opportunities for women. And that was Dexter, our gynecologist of the day. To be able to have open conversation for young women who are leaving home, going out on their own, never had conversations with their parent, but knew that they could get the specific information they needed from a professional at Planned Parenthood. Great point, Duran. Thank you so much. Tacoma, what's on your mind?
Mental health treatment for us brothers. Men and anyone listening to this, it's okay to feel, it's okay to cry. Mental health treatment is crucial for us to deal with our anger, especially in light of what we talked about today.
Wow.
We have to deal with these issues with our anger, and mental health treatment is the gateway to just an improved life. And it opens your potential to live a fulfilling life. And I just urge anyone listening to this, if you're feeling something, if you're feeling angry all the time, please see a professional about it. It will greatly improve your life.
Listen, that was going to be part of just mental health, particularly for men, black and white. We see a lot of this handgun violence happening by men, whether they're walking into a grocery store or into a middle school, or what's happening in neighborhoods of color around the country. They're young men between the ages of 16 and 30 years old. So ditto to you, Tacoma, and I promise you, you've got to come back. If not, I'm coming to Chicago to get you to make sure that you join us. Thank you for joining me at such short notice, and we look forward to you being a guest on the show on a regular basis. So thank you so much. We appreciate that. My name is Frankie Darcell. We do this each and every weekday, each and every other week. So make sure that you join us and click like on YouTube. Follow us on the iHeartRadio network, Black Information Network, and Real Times Media. We'll do it again the next time. To my guests, thank you guys. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.